I want to talk about digital censorship, and I want to explore why it is a problem in a democratic society for speech to be restricted in the private sphere. Now, there are some libertarians, and of course there are many on the left who say, well, Dinesh, why are you complaining about these platforms? They're private platforms. They should be able to do whatever they want. Where's the threat to free speech? The only threat to free speech comes from government restriction. That's why the First Amendment talks about Congress shall make no law restricting freedom of speech. And I want to argue that this is actually a narrow way of thinking about free speech, because not only is free speech need to be protected in the private sphere, that's the most important place where democratic debate occurs. Now, I'm going to make my case by recourse to an important philosophical thinker. This is the philosopher Charles Taylor. I'm going to be referring to his book, which is called Modern Social Imaginaries. Charles Taylor, by the way, for many years a philosopher of note, of worldwide renown at Oxford, now at McGill University in Canada. He's Canadian. And what does he mean by the concept of a social imaginary? Well, here's what he's getting at. We live in a society where we have these large organisms that we refer to, and yet these organisms are puzzling when you think about it. Think about a phrase like the economy. We speak about the economy, but what do we really mean by an economy? We're referring to 300 million people in America who trade and interact with each other, and you're interacting with people you don't know, you've never met. It's essentially a community of strangers who are collectively, through their voluntary actions, producing a kind of result. And the result we call the economy. That's the gross domestic product of America, for example, the collective effort of all these people acting individually, but acting as part of a network. Well, says Charles Taylor, our public debate is like that. It's a network. It's a network of communication. And it's a network of communication, he stresses, that occurs not in the government. There's very little genuine argument, debate that occurs in government. Government is ultimately about making and carrying out policy. But, says Taylor, this debate occurs in the private sphere. And very beautifully in this book, Modern Social Imaginaries, the imaginary here refers to an imagined community. There's an imagined community in America that forms things like, well, we use the term public opinion. Well, what is public opinion? Public opinion is what emerges through the private interaction of lots of people who are hands-on about politics, who communicate with each other through social media, through newspapers, letters to the editor. They do all kinds of things, but their collective effort produces something where, you can say Americans think this or Americans think that, but that is the result of this sustained political engagement and action and discussion. Now, says Taylor, in the old world, people had their place in life. You were a serf, or you were a craftsman, and you didn't really necessarily have to engage with people. You just learned your craft, and you did it, and you looked after your family, and that was it. The political affairs of society were handled by someone else, by the monarchs or by the aristocrats. But, says Taylor, in a democratic society, that begins to change. It begins to change first with the emergence in Europe of what Taylor calls the Republic of Letters. The Republic of Letters would be basically people who are not in the government, but they are interested in what the government does. And these are people, well, in England, they would meet in cafes. I talked an earlier podcast about Samuel Johnson sitting across from David Hume and Edmund Burke and the actor David Garrick, and they would discuss the issues of the day. What were they really doing? They were engaging in a kind of civic discourse with political implications. They were almost, you could say, advising power. So the key point here is that you've got this intellectual life going on in the community. It's removed from government, but it exercises a moral force on the government. In fact, its moral force is all the greater because it is thought to be deliberative. These are people who are distinguished thinkers in their own right. Johnson, the literary scholar, Edmund Burke, the statesman, and then you have Adam Smith, the economist. So you've got people from different walks of life bringing their knowledge and expertise into interaction with each other, and the idea is to improve the moral but also the political tone of society. So here's the point I'm trying to make. This debate in America occurs in the sphere outside of government. If it occurs at all, it's going to occur through the media, it'll occur in academic journals, it's going to occur in public debates when they occur on campuses, for example, or elsewhere. It's going to occur in civic meetings. And so when you shut it down in any way, digital media being, for example, the most powerful way of saying, listen, in the public square, outside of government admittedly, but nevertheless still public, where people communicate with each other and argue back and forth, you have these digital censors who go, we're going to take one position in this debate. We're going to excommunicate everybody who takes the other position. You are delivering a mortal blow to a practice intrinsic to democracy that developed alongside democracy in Western societies over the past 200 years. This is the way things are done in our society. This is how we keep an external intellectual and moral check on power. So the digital census, it isn't just about, you can't say this about hydroxychloroquine, or you can't mention election fraud, Dinesh. It isn't just about that. It's ultimately about restricting, kneecapping, decapitating, defenestrating, and choking off the intellectual lifeblood of a free democratic society.